Right, so now we will go over some of the key terms of the pro forma power purchase agreement. So some of the key terms that we're going to touch upon are credit requirements, where a letter of credit or a parental guarantee will be required if the selected bidder does not meet PacifiCorp's credit requirements. Then we have seller security. Seller security required to support delayed damages for failure to reach commercial operation or default damages for post-COD. For commercial operation delay, seller will be provided up to 365 days to cure a delay in scheduled commercial operation. However, the delayed damages will be assessed on that. Post-execution condition precedent. PacifiCorp's ability to obtain designated network resource transmission service at no additional cost. So network upgrades and planned costs to improve that come back on DNRs is what that's referencing. Annual performance guarantees, annual resource mechanical guarantee, and guarantee threshold percentage. So we will have we'll have a mechanical guarantee on these versus an output guarantee, and I guess, does anybody have any question on those?
Yeah, Melanie. So actually, we did have a question on the slide before this. And I'm wondering, Sylvia, since we've heard from you today, if you'd want to jump in and voice your question so I don't stumble over it. And if not, happy to jump in too. But last time I read Oregon as OR, so saving myself here.
Yeah, no, thank you. Sorry, Melanie, I was not fast enough in typing, and so I got my question in by the time you were presenting your slide, but it was actually for the prior presenter.
Oh, that's fine.
I believe that maybe that was Mark, but I'm not sure.
Mark, yeah.
Yeah, Mark. Okay, so Mark, you mentioned project labor agreement as I think an example of one of the social benefits that the company is thinking about, is open to considering when thinking about the value of energy. And I was wondering if you have other examples of what the company is thinking about for social benefits, and specifically if you had, well, in addition to what are examples you might have been considering, whether community benefit agreements is part of what you've been contemplating, factoring in that particular social benefits category.
Hey, Mark, this is Ron. Let me help you.
Okay, yeah.
We are looking at several different things right now. I don't think they're ready for prime time, but we will further describe and provide what it is that we're looking at as it relates to a credit, to a host of different things. Mark listed some of them before, or certainly during the workshop. And it will also be embedded in the RFP offering that we put forth in terms of how we're trying to look at certain things and give certain bidders benefits where, there's benefits to having their power on the system. But I don't think that they're completely locked down yet. And I think in short order, or just before, or as part of issuing the RFP, we'll have those available.
Thank you, Ron. I appreciate that. And then I have a thought, and that kind of JP's point, and then Matt was getting back in this question of potential subset of bidders shaping an RFP, which I understand and appreciate it being concerning. But I wonder if the company will be willing to maybe work in or like floating some of these criteria that you're thinking about through stakeholders that are not, that basically can commit to not being bidders. I'm frankly, as our comments by the energy advocates reflect, thinking about how the small scale renewables procurement efforts can dovetail or be part of or be expanded to consider community benefiting renewable energy, which companies plans in our opinion could be stronger, and we really want you to maybe be a little bit more enthusiastic about that type of projects. And so that could be a thought, Matt, maybe understanding and recognizing that the concern about a subset of bidders shaping a procurement does not feel good. Maybe there's a lot of stakeholders that are not going to be bidding into this RFP that are just energy advocates. I mean, I use the energy advocates as an example because that's the people I interact with the most, but that type of stakeholder that could try to help shape some of these conversations and not, and will not be in the bidding pool.
Yeah, so this is Matt. I think to a certain extent, I mean, as far as the discussion, like JP said, and taking input, I think the one thing, it doesn't matter who's in the conversation. It doesn't matter if PacifiCorp comes up with it themselves. If it's not justifiable, then we start to run into issues about kind of restricting that market. And then that sets us up with FERC. And so, I mean, kind of in the end, I mean, I don't think there's a problem with having the discussion. I do have, there's a little bit more of an issue I see with kind of where you involve the bidders. But, to try to identify things that PacifiCorp can think about as far as the value is fine. But in the end, what it fundamentally comes down to is there a justification for that? Have you priced it properly? Or created, I mean, can you value a non-price attribute so it doesn't look protectionist? Yeah, I'm sure you're aware. I mean, that the federal jurisdiction over wholesale energy sales has to look at that. And if we're starting to preference that, we can run into problems there. There can be a complaint lodged against us from another bidder, and it's more what the end result is as opposed to who is discussing it with us. Although bidders raises a different issue as far as, bidders trying to influence what those factors are for, potentially for their own purposes. So it's kind of that raises that risk quite a bit. But I mean, as thing as taking input, I don't think that's a problem, but we have to, in the end, go back and try to justify it so that we don't get in trouble with FERC.
Understood, Matt. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think, what we're not trying to, jump out and see other things like Tom expressed. I mean, these costs are going to go to Oregon customers. We think that there's, certain benefits that we can articulate to that. But, kind of in the end, the utility is just wearing this risk of, essentially impeding the wholesale energy market. And we just have to be very careful about that.
Thank you, Matt. I understand that. We don't want you to do that. But yeah, no, and I think maybe a summary of my line of thinking here, and it really is kind of like thinking on the fly as I'm hearing the presentation is, I think can be summarized well. We're trying to explore how the company, through this procurement strategy, through an additional parallel procurement strategy can be more proactive on the community-based renewable energy resources front. That's why I show up to this presentation. That's why I'm interested in this topic. And, you can see it in the comments of the energy advocates. There's a lot of interest in seeing some maybe more robust action by the company on that front. The company does mention the small-scale renewable energy RFP as a potential path for community-based renewable energy development. That I think Tim alluded to some of the concerns with, expecting CBREs to bid into an SSR RFP. And so I'm trying to explore and understand if this is going to be one of the paths for CBREs, how can the RFP better accommodate for that type of development? And so you see my question about, the social benefits that could be considering community benefits agreements. That's very much in line with this kind of line of thinking about how we can see more robust CBRE action from the 2023 CEP and IRP.
Yeah, and I totally understand. And I think that's where like Corey, Scott, and I, we've been kind of working on kind of looking at, additional options that may be more appropriate for CBRE development, where we can work with the communities I mean, I do see it. Yeah, I mean, participating in a competitive bidding for a CBRE, that's that's not necessarily the it's going to make it a little bit harder because of the process. But a lot of CBREs are also going to be a little bit smaller. I mean, I expect them to be smaller than what we would, or our limit is on this.
Thank you. Well, I'm enthusiastic to hear more about this.
Yeah, but we are. I mean, we're looking at the other options for CBREs. I mean, I think if there is one that can bid in, but it does get kind of complicated, and we almost think CBREs, they're going to need a little. Some of this is there's going to be exceptions, of course, but they tend to be smaller projects. They're going to be more dedicated to a local community, or, a much smaller area or group of customers. And so I think that we really have to start looking at where those other options are. Because I don't think they're going to meet the 3. Ron, I think we're looking at 3 megawatts and above. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that's right.
And I do see some other folks off mute, so just want to make sure that we've closed the loop there, or if there's anything else to add. Not hearing anything, but just noting again, I love this dialogue, and thank you so much to the Small Scales team and Pacific Power for being on the line and ready to talk about this.
Actually, sorry, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
I wait till you're done and think you're over it, and then I pounce. I'm kind of curious in thinking about, and maybe this feels out of left field, but there's all these larger grid discussions and grid resiliency discussions. I wonder if, because I have no idea, if the utility ever makes clear places where you guys as a company would want solar, physically places where there's demand, where the grid is ready. Is there any communication where you're hey, we really want projects in these areas, and then thoughts about how even that can be if that's something that's taken into account in the RFP process, if y'all are oh, this one, it makes interconnection easier, right? It's coming back to some of these interconnection things. But I'm always wondering where I'm how can we have more win-wins in the places where it makes sense, or if developers just kind of know where I feel developers aren't developing on spaces based on what the grid needs, but based on where they can get legal permission and the land and places where they can build, and taking that kind of lens. But yeah, I was curious if y'all could talk about that at all.
Tom, you want this one, or you want me to
Yeah,
answer?
you want
So there is so many things in your statement, and I guess question that can be addressed, and I'm going to try and keep it real high level. Generally speaking, developers know, because they're smart people. I mean, this is their bread and butter. They hire electrical engineers, people that are retired from the industry. I mean, they poach talented people from the industry, and because they want the expertise. So, your utility scale developers know where the valuable spots are. And they charge a premium when they bid those assets in, because they know what they have. Also, and you've heard this mentioned several times and in different ways. We have an impartiality issue, where we have to be very careful about providing too much information about our transmission system. So our transmission system, the transmission services, transmission planning, transmission operations. I mean, that is a top secret organization. They don't share that stuff even with us, except at very high levels and for planning purposes only. And I mean, I don't know if this is too deep in the weeds for what you were asking. Am I going? I just want to check in and make sure I'm going in the direction that you were looking for.
Yeah, I'm just, like, I'm not a solar developer at all. But I'm in DSP conversations with, with you guys, with PGE a little bit more. And I guess I'm just like, I guess I don't understand why it would be like top secret. Is that like for security reasons? Because it seems to me like, I get where you guys don't want to be partial and provide specialty information to, like, the people who are in the know, but like having it be available to like everyone, it just seems like an opportunity for more win-wins for grid resiliency, for ratepayers, if this solar is all going in the best possible places. But you're kind of saying like, but then they charge differently based on how that is because they have something extra.
Correct.
Well, now wait, can we first go ahead, Tom?
No, Ron, go, please.
First, let's level set. PacTrans and the team you're talking about here have a lead wall between them, and that's because of FERC rules. So we have no additional insight related to how and where to place assets than anyone else who might be interested in developing on our system. So I want to set that stage first. Secondly, PacTrans does not, that I'm aware of, I know they don't, I don't even have to say that. A transmission grid is incredibly dynamic. It is always changing. There are loads that are changing. There are lines that are being added. There's generation that's being added. And they don't, in essence, if I'm going to just make this simple, put out a map and say, gosh, we'd like to have power here, here, and here. They don't. And because it's so dynamic, and then you'd have to be very, very careful that you are not creating any sort of differentiation or favoritism or anything else to anybody. So it's what's my point? It goes back to what Tom says, that the most sophisticated developers go about acquiring or trying to acquire this information by a host of studies that for folks that do, in essence, transmission studies for our system, not related to PacTrans, and try and ascertain where those best areas are. But largely, it can be hit and miss, and that is unfortunately just a reality associated with our business. And you often don't find out until you've identified a place that maybe fulfills all the other requirements of a good site, that being infrastructure, what have you. You submit your bid, and for some reason, based upon where it sits or what line it's going to tie into, the overall economics, might be challenged because of the upgrades that may be necessary for you to do so. So I'm trying to answer your question. Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say that there's one important thing that might be obvious to like you and I, but for the audience that's on the call, these places that are extremely valuable, developers are looking at those places and they're not looking to build a 20 megawatt resource. If they've got the golden ticket, they want to drop in a 500 megawatt resource and not a 20 megawatt resource.
I see.
So that's
go ahead, Ron. Let that scare you, because often these small assets, as a result of those type of activities, can slide in. But as to where they can slide in and where those best places are, the only way to find out is to submit a study.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's all like so new to me that's really interesting context. So yeah, thank you for that.
No, thank you for the questions. I'm going to give this an extra minute, just in case anyone is still noodling on this or writing into chat, because we have had a lot of questions and dialogue, so I want to really honor that, should there be any follow-ups. Sherry, you have me nervous to move on now after getting ahead of myself last time, but I will dare to say next slide.
This is, I just wanted to put it out there for resources for prospective participants, for small scale procurement participant resources, that there are other resources and they're listed on this slide, and the slide will be available. We just wanted to put them all in one spot for you, just to have all the resources in one spot. So
thank you, Melanie.
yeah,
and I think
for
yep,
Ryan
I think
Harvey.
we'll hand it over to Ryan Harvey to continue this this discussion on CBREs. But I believe most of the SSR folks will be on the line. So if you do happen to have follow-up questions or comments, drop them in and we'll get them answered. But without further ado, we'll hand it over to Ryan Harvey.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me all right?
We can. Thank you,
Oh,
Ryan.
good. Okay. Good afternoon, all. My name is Ryan. Along with my colleague, John Rush, I have been one of the folks that's working on the development of a series of approaches that Pacific Power is going to take to advance community-based renewable energy. I was thinking actually before we moved on to this first slide tag, maybe I'd take a quick minute to yeah, sorry, Ron. I want to take a quick minute to to briefly compare and contrast CBREs with what we were just talking about, which are the small scale renewable projects. Because with regards to SSRs, well, and maybe this audience is all very well aware of this, but Pacific Power is working to acquire a large amount of these projects to ensure that 10% of of Oregon capacity comes from those small projects by 2030. With regards to CBRE projects, we are really we're looking for ways, quite simply, to to provide support for communities that are interested in developing CBREs, and so that's what I will be sharing in these forthcoming slides. I mean, I would say as a reminder, SSRs have to be under 20 megawatts in size and and not net metered, but CBREs really just simply need to have some CB, benefit to communities, and and be renewable energy based projects. So I don't know. Hopefully that provides a little bit of context as we move forward. So thanks, Tag. Now we can go to the next one. All right. So I've shared this particular slide with this particular group before, but as a kind of a high end or high level review, these are the 4 core actions that PAC identified that it would take to support CBRE projects when we published our clean energy plan. This first one is essentially to advance our own learning to get to a point where we better understand just exactly how much interest and inertia, I would say, exists in our communities with regards to CBREs. The second one, we signaled that we would work to reimagine our battery storage pilot into a CBRE pilot, and there's more coming on that in just a bit. The third is that we wanted to consider our own role in helping to bring external funding to the communities that we serve, and then also finally to see how we might better support communities both throughout our own internal processes and to navigate, other opportunities that exist out there right now. And so, as in these past few months, we've been working to advance these 4 core components, and this is maybe unsurprising to folks in this world. We're finding that they're now largely overlapping with each other. So, for example, this number 2 folds into number 1 because a key strategy, for us as we develop our CBRE pilot details will be, continuing to interview CBRE project managers with, in-flight projects to learn a little bit more about what our pilot should be actually looking like. And then, one key strategy to address public funding, which is number 3 here, is, we think, to support community applications for this external funding within our pilot, which is this number 2. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Next slide, please. And then, continuing a recap to give you a sense of scale. In our clean energy plan, we included a study of the potential of CBREs that we saw likely to be developed in our service territory throughout the rest of this decade. And so out of the 95-ish megawatts that we included in that study, most all of them came from programs and channels that already have that are already existing. The existing processes are in place and the personnel exist, and that's represented by that group A on the top. The new work that we see for ourselves is represented in group B down at the bottom. Because the few CBRE projects that at that time, at least, we predicted would come outside of the group A channel, we thought would require more support. And what we've seen in the last couple months is that support is turning out to look a little different than what we'd initially thought. Right, so we're now seeing this box down at the bottom grow quite a bit, which is very exciting. So, for example, when we filed the clean energy plan, at the time there were 2 projects in our service territory that had received a planning grant from the Oregon Department of Energy, and 2 projects that had received a construction grant. Now there's 26 projects in our service territory that have been awarded just those, that ODO grant. There's many more communities that are signaling that there's an interest in applying when the 3rd application window opens. We think maybe early next year. And then there are other projects in our service territory that are moving forward with other types of funding too. So we're feeling as though at this point we're wanting to assist in maybe other ways than direct funding, which is a conversation that I've had with those folks on previous calls already. So I think we believe that as a utility we're unique in this space in that we can see to it that aspects of these types of CBRE projects, namely the battery storage component of many of these projects, they can provide system-wide benefits to all of our Oregon service territory. So we want to collaborate with projects to get them connected in a way that they will benefit from participating in what will be a future demand response program for batteries developed by PAC. The incentives that would come from participating in that DR program, which again is yet to be developed, will help those local communities to fund those projects. But their participation in that DR program would actually help our entire system, right? So in fact, this pilot that we're about to embark upon will help to provide learning that is really, it's going to help us right size this future battery DR program that I'm speaking of. And then when this larger tide of projects eventually comes online, we think that we'll be in a really great position to essentially double the benefits. So that local communities would see the local benefits of these projects, but that the system-wide benefits would be enjoyed by customers throughout our service territory as well. So that kind of brings me to the next slide. Because that collaboration I was just speaking about is number one on our approach here. The first of three approaches, for our CBRE pilot. So maybe I'll give you a quick minute to read that number one and then the blue box that is associated with it. So there's more to learn about how we are going to elevate these the battery storage component, and I want to explain how we hope to learn it. We've already talked with about a third of the project managers that are linked to the ODO grant that I mentioned, as well as other project managers that are outside of that grant program. And what we're learning already is that this quote unquote partnering is going to probably look slightly different depending on each of the details of these individual and specific projects. And so, in the coming months, the next 2 to 3 months, we'll be continuing those conversations to hammer out the specifics on the type of support, the guardrails, for example, that are going to be related to that. And then, with regards to the other two aspects of this pilot, this number two. We aim to continue providing feasibility studies in the same way that we have in the current version of this grant pilot focused on battery storage. And I'm excited about the continuation of that because, this contrasted with number one is a great way for us to meet communities where they are where they are is at the beginning stages of planning for an intended CBRE. And so whereas number one, we're hoping to to elevate folks that are already in motion. Number two helps those that are just beginning their understanding of what a CBRE journey might look like. And then the third aspect of this pilot is something I've mentioned before, but we continue to hold as important, which is the opportunity to aid communities who are seeking outside funding, other grants that often require some level of grant matching, whether that's a direct fund or an in-kind contribution. So there will be a process developed within this pilot to help folks to seek out that money that that we mentioned as part of those 4 core commitments. And so maybe before I'd like to take some comments or questions if there are any, but before that, I'll move on to this next the next slide, because this one is it's pretty busy. It's a bit of a catch-all slide, but we thought it would be important to put at least the high-level elements of the program design on a single slide for folks who are interested. I also think it might be a good idea to do this so that folks who are looking at this presentation after the fact are able to see the one-stop shop. But I will say that the outcomes that are articulated at the top of this slide here, to me at least, they feel even more relevant than they and exciting and pressing than they did a month ago or 2 months ago when we developed this slide. We do want to know more about the decision points and the challenges related to particularly the connectivity of batteries with these CBRE projects. And we really think that with this we're laying out here something that strikes the balance between the advancement of pretty innovative projects in our service territory and also the responsible allocation of ratepayer dollars to these types of CBRE projects. So maybe I'll pause there in case anybody has a comment or a question about what they have seen or heard so far. You you wore yourselves out with the SSR conversation.
I was
Okay.
about to say, I don't. We've learned that everybody isn't shy about contributing, so would love
Yeah.
to hear it. But also, feel free to follow up or check the notes should you want
Absolutely.
more information here. I know Ryan
Yeah.
has made himself truly just a resource to everybody that has engaged with this program.
So what I believe is the final slide here kind of outlines a few next steps for us. The bottom left bubble, we are Pacific Power is in the process of propping up a web page that will serve as a resource hub for communities that are interested in developing a CBRE project, but wanting and likely needing to learn a little bit more about what that might look like and feel like. The top box, encompasses those conversations with communities that are ongoing, that are going to help us to add a lot of detail to this pilot proposal in the final months of this year, so that it can really best support the wants and needs of the projects in our communities that it's designed to advance. And then on the bottom right, when we have finalized those details, what we would really appreciate is any final stakeholder feedback, likely at the very early part of next year, so that we can subsequently file for approval and make a real impact with CBRE projects in our community. So Sylvia,
Yes.
I see your hand.
Thank you, Ryan, for that presentation. I appreciate, seeing Pacific Power think about how to proactively advance community-based renewable energy resources. I think the grant pilot is interesting. You can see in the Energy Advocate comments, there's like more comments about, maybe sense of urgency about, how the pilot can support environmental justice communities in areas that have resiliency, reliability concerns. I think I would really like to see maybe over the course of this CEP process at the PUC, over the course of the CEP series, maybe like a strengthening, I don't know how to best say it, like more articulately, of the CBRE approach, including the grant pilot, the CBRE pilot, so that they can more effectively and more urgently, address community needs. We spend hours and hours and hours talking as a community of advocates, that some people in this room are here, some people are not, I don't even know anymore, but like a resiliency event or reliability event has very different consequences for a person A versus person B, depending on how A and B are situated. And so I really would like to see maybe more ambition and more muscle on this. I'm also thinking, and as I'm listening to the SSR conversation and the CBRE conversation, about just the difference between PGE and Pacific Power's approach to CBREs. And, as you are going now to procure, 10% of your, meet the 10% requirement for SSRs, can Pacific Power, look deeper and maybe a portion, you are going to be procuring small scale resources, can a portion of those be CBREs as well? And that's, I guess, a suggestion or a request for continued exploration of this is cool. I'd like to see this. I like where this is going. I would like to see it grow. And also, how can Pacific Power lean in more into CBREs and have maybe a more ambitious CBRE strategy that, potentially helps it meet its 10% goals and or regulatory goals, but that also can try to, or can also have that important additional benefit of better supporting some of its communities. I think with Pacific Power's territory and the nature of your territory, that feels very urgent. So thank you for your presentation. I would love to continue our conversation about how this can be a little stronger, not just the pilot itself, but also the CBRE strategy more generally. Oh, and one last thing, actually, I have to drop now, so I'm just going to monopolize the mic since I have it. But one more thing is, a lot of the potential you mentioned all of these programs, right? And as we were reading the CEP and trying to understand how Pacific Power is thinking about CBREs, something that kept coming up in these conversations we have is, is the company planning to do anything to try to maybe catalyze more development through those programs, right? Like community solar is a good example. Pacific Power has seen very limited development in community solar in its territory. What's within Pacific Power's power, no pun intended by works, what's within Pacific Power's control to help identify and remove barriers so that we can see more community solar development and more access to all of those people that do not have, that, presumably are choosing community solar either because they don't have the financial or infrastructure to have solar on their spaces. Just trying to understand like what. So if the large overwhelming majority of your potential is through all of these 5 different development paths, then like is Pacific Power going to do something other than status quo over the next, say less than 7 years, 6 some years that we have to 2030 to see if we can stimulate more development through those paths? That would be something that I would really like to hear more from the company about, because of how much of the potential that you identified is in those boxes.
This is fantastic feedback, Sylvia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ryan. And on this conversation of like how we can have like a more robust CBRE strategy, I would love to like be a resource. Like the energy advocates can be a resource. I know like this is a near and dear topic to many people's hearts in this group, and I know many people will be willing and interested to like brainstorm and throw ideas. And
I would love it. I would love it. Yeah.
Well, I'll put my email in the chat.
And
okay, thank you. I'll reach
just
out.
adding there, sorry to cut in, Sylvia, I know you have to drop, but
Yeah.
we will follow up with a survey and would love to hear all of these inputs on just what topics you'd like to hear more about. So would love to just point that out to everybody. We'll feature it here shortly, but for those who have to drop, we will send that, and we'd love your input if you have the time and are willing.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. See ya.
Do we have any other questions, comments for Ryan on CBREs before we move on? I see that Caroline in the comments did agree with everything that Sylvia said, so appreciate that feedback.
Thank you all for your time. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. All right. We made it, guys. After a great conversation and more to come, would love to open it up for any public comment that you may have on the engagement space or anything that you heard today. Not hearing any, but again, that does not mean that you cannot jump in if I was too expedient with that. But we'll hand it back over to Stephanie to cover next steps and close us out. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Really excited with the conversations we had today. There was a lot, for us to go back and revisit and talk about internally and see what we can do and bring back, and definitely reaching out to you, to those willing to share their time with us. That was really amazing exchange, and we appreciate your feedback and input that you provide to us in this process. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, this is the last of the planned of the engagement series for 2023, but we are looking at 2024 now, and understanding that this needs to continue forward. We need to have more of these engagements, just like today. Great conversations, great input from you all. We want to open up those opportunities again to make sure we can have this dialogue and conversations and things we can include into the conversation. So, you know, just some things I wanted to put on here, you know, some things on the horizon, you know, with 2024, you know, we would want to come back and talk about, you know, where we're at with our action plan, the acknowledgement of our IRP and CEP. And then, you know, next year we'll be, towards the end of the year, we'll be, you know, looking at filing the biannual report of assessing the community benefits and impacts. So, you know, there's definitely a lot of information to share and have conversations on all of those topics as well, to add on, you know, further in what we've already done today and in our clean energy plan as well. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. And as Morgan mentioned, we have a survey asking for you all to, you know, provide more of your input that you can for us. You know, we're listing, as you know, the topics of the clean energy plan, asking for, you know, putting those in a level of what your interests are on those. Also providing where you can provide a topic that you would like us to bring back that may not be in that list for you to put the ranking of the interest level on those. Furthermore, I know everybody loves their Friday afternoons. Thought it would be best too to also offer getting some feedback from you all on your time availability. So, you know, if we're looking at you know, morning sessions at earlier afternoon or around this time frame, if that works, and then days. So, you know, what we provided those questions as well. So if you can provide us your feedback there, you know, we'll take all of this information back and assess it and see what we can do to accommodate the majority as we can. And, you know, we will have more information coming for the next engagements as soon as we get those planned out. So there will be more to come. We'll be reaching out to you all. I know most people you know, reach out by email. We also have it on our website. So, you know, those are the places that you'll see the information coming, but definitely, you know, provide us feedback. We appreciate it. We also do have, you know, our email that you can also respond to for the Oregon CEP. So we appreciate that too as well. And thank you for your time today. This was, you know, what we had to cover. And I'm again appreciative of everybody's time and contributing to the conversation with us.
Yes. I did drop that link into the chat as well. And again, we will follow up with that just to really make sure that it's getting to everyone that it needs to. As Stephanie mentioned, we really appreciate you all for the really robust discussion, and we look forward to future engagements and diving deeper into the different topics that you all identify in 2024. Have a great afternoon.